I'd like to use the next 30 minutes to have an open conversation with all of you. I'm going to take just 1 second because I want to see your faces. So I'm going to drag you over on the other screen so I can see you all. Some of you smiling and some of you just leaning on your head a little bit bored, but smiling now. So I want to have a conversation about a proposal that myself and members of the steering committee have been thinking about for the last several weeks about how we could work more effectively as a community in 2021. So I want to start by reinforcing our mission. We're here as OHDSI to improve health by empowering a community that collaboratively generates the evidence that promotes better health decisions and better care. And on a regular basis, it's good for us to take a look at this mission and reflect on whether or not it still seems to be true to the charge that we have. And indeed, as a steering committee, we looked at this and said this still seems to be on point with what we want to achieve. In various capacities, we talk about OHDSI and the journey that we're taking, and specifically we provide this picture of the cartoon representation of the journey from data to evidence, and recognize that we're all trying to work together, recognizing that this is a bit of an arduous journey. And so we like to use the journey analogy quite a lot, and I think that we're making progress on learning about this journey, but there's still a lot more steps along the way that we have to take together. George uses this slide often when we talk about the OHDSI community to say that we're all in this journey together. And indeed, we have now built a community that has thousands of researchers all around the world. But I'm going to be provocative in today's conversation to say that there are journeys and that each of us are on individual journeys. But the question that I want to pose to the group is, how can we actually make sure that we're actually on one journey together rather than just observing the journeys that each of us are taking individually? So to do that, I'd like to start by asking you all to fill out a little form. You can type in the link that's on the screen there, or just in the chat of this meeting, I've just posted this URL. It's pollev.com/PatrickRyan800. So I'd like for you to go to that link. And when you get there, you should be asked a question. Why are you on the journey with OHDSI? And I'd like for you guys to answer that question. I've provided some example answers to get you started, of maybe some reasons why you might consider this, but you also are encouraged to enter in your own answers of reasons why you've joined the journey with us. You can vote for as many as you'd like. There's no right answer to this question. There's no wrong answer to the question either, although I think anybody who suggests that watching me dance is probably in poor taste. So we're seeing a lot of you are on this journey because you want to collaborate with other researchers around the world. Many of you are inspired because you want to generate evidence. A good chunk of you are interested in developing open source solutions to public health problems. There's 9 of you right now who just have voted for the data network itself. We're also seeing several people now pushing up the idea that we also want to improve the way in which medical evidence is generated. To be part of a community that's trying to make a positive impact. To improve the quality of epidemiologic studies using observational data. Someone says it's everything and just because it's fun. I certainly have a lot of fun with this. We've got 5 folks that are in it for the dance parties and the tacos. That's okay too. Okay, so there's a diversity of reasons that are motivating you all to be part of the journey, and you can continue to throw in your answers as you're interested. And I think it's actually important for us to recognize that each of us is here on our own accord because we want to be, and that reason for wanting to be can and is okay to be different for different people. We all are coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives. We are trying to get something out of this experience that's different. And so it's okay that we all have different perspectives about what we want to get out and why we're here. But I do think it's interesting that the vast majority of folks said that the reason that they're on this journey is because you want to collaborate with other researchers around the world. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time today digging into collaboration and how that's going for us and how we might be able to do things differently. So to do that, I want to just tell you a brief anecdote, and I'm sure that my story here is probably not altogether different from many of your stories that you had from last year. During our time of pandemic lockdowns, you know, the normal things that we would normally do, gather in large groups and do lots of indoor activities, were taken away from us. And so many of us were trying to find opportunities to still get out of the house and do something. And for Holly and Catherine and I, that was venturing out to go rafting. And we got this idea because actually we found out that there was this place up in the Poconos in Pennsylvania that was actually doing socially distant and safe and appropriate rafting. The way that they were doing that was their typical 8-person raft. They were saying, you can come rafting with us so long as you just stay with your own family unit to go rafting. And, you know, they had pictures like this picture that I took off of their website, which makes it look so fun because a whole bunch of people are smiling and they're paddling down the river, and it looks like a great time. And so my wife, Holly, she convinced me that this was going to be a good thing for us to go do. And it turned out that the one that we found, whereas most places that do rafting suggest that you need to be old and capable and can swim and all of that kind of thing, we found one that actually would allow a 4-year-old to go with you. So we're like, great, let's take Catherine whitewater rafting with us. So we decided to go up to go whitewater rafting. As proof of it, there's a picture of me and Holly and Catherine out on the boat. Our au pair, Marika, took this picture. So there's 4 of us in this boat of 8. And they asked us if we had ever gone rafting, and we said no, we had never actually gone and done such a thing before. And of course, Catherine had just became eligible for this risky thing of putting a 4-year-old on a whitewater rafting boat. And so I said, okay, it'll be totally fine. You can just go out there. We went with a group of about probably about 12 other rafts, and everybody had different levels of capability, different levels of skill, but they said, it's all going to be fine. You can all go rafting. Now, many of you have seen me on the camera, and you know that I'm a man of, let's say, stature. And a boat of 8 people, if you put 4 people in 8 people, that means you don't necessarily have everything evenly distributed. My wife is not a person of the same stature as me, neither is our young and slender au pair, neither is our 4-year-old daughter. So you can imagine a boat for 8 with a very large man on one side, 2 less large individuals on the other side, and a 4-year-old in the middle. But this is going to be fine. We're going to go whitewater rafting. So we all get out in the boats, and they provide us about I'd say approximately a 30-second introduction to how to whitewater raft, whereby they basically say, you're a team, work together, paddle together, go down the river, it's all going to be fun, have at it. And sure enough, some of the boats, 6 to 8 people jumped in the boat. They all said, okay, I'm the leader, follow me, let's paddle. And they just started going down the river. Meanwhile, Holly, Catherine, Marika, and I got on our boat, and we were wondering, who's leading? Who's going to provide the instructions, and who are we going to actually paddle along to? And sure enough, when you put a big heavy dude on one end of a boat and 3 light people on the other boats, the boat's not necessarily even. I have to say, Catherine's wonderful for an awful lot of things in life, but paddling a rafting boat isn't necessarily her strength. So for the most part, she was kind of sitting in the middle of the boat, and all I'm worried about for her is just making sure that she doesn't fall off of this thing and drown. So I got my mind kind of distracted, but nonetheless, we decide we all hop in the boat and we're gonna paddle together. Except paddling together when you don't decide on who's doing what and how it's going to work can look kind of like a fiasco. What can happen is if everybody puts their paddle on the same side of the boat and starts paddling, you know what you do? You start spinning around in circles. You can take other approaches, like I'd have Holly and Marika paddle 5 times really quick, and then I'd take one really strong push on the other side. You know what happens there? You kind of do this zigzag thing where you keep going back and forth, occasionally hitting the sides of the river. What you don't do is go down the river following the groups that have figured out how to work together. Now, I sat there on that boat. That picture you can see, it's kind of a very fake smile of mine in that picture, because I'm not entirely happy in that picture. Because at that moment in time, I am extraordinarily stressed out, because we've gone on this family fun time to go have a nice leisurely time going rafting down the river. Catherine's having a good time because she doesn't have to do any of the work. I gotta like cover her. Holly's trying to do her best. Marika's taking a photo, so what does that mean? She's not actually helping me paddle. So I'm sitting there white-knuckled trying to make sure that this boat doesn't crash, that we go down the river, that my daughter doesn't fall off and down, and this is for, COVID enjoyment. The thing that was actually most annoying about this experience wasn't what was happening on our boat, that we were spinning around and zigzagging and not really going anywhere until we got a little bit of nudge. What was actually most annoying was watching the other boats. Because those boats that figured out how to paddle in the same direction, they were just going straight down the river. They were having a great time. In fact, so they were so far ahead of us that the crew leader had to actually tell them to slow down. And you know what they did? Like the insult of all injuries for me? They cracked open a cooler of beers and started drinking, because they had actually gone so far ahead that they could actually kick back and enjoy the leisure and the nice time that they had actually had. So why do I share this story? We went to go have fun together. We all had different objectives and what we were going to achieve about this, but we actually didn't figure out the strategy of how we were going to paddle together. And it took what was going to be an extraordinary fun time together, created a little bit of stress. And yet at the end of it, I had this great time. Catherine had a wonderful time. Holly had a great time. But I can still remember getting off and thinking, like, that didn't need to be that stressful. We created a situation where we could have been cracking a beer down the river having fun. But what we didn't do is cooperate and coordinate and collaborate towards the common goal. Or that we thought we did, but really what we were doing was we were 3.5 people doing 3.5, going in 3.5 different directions. So I share that anecdote because when I think about our community, I think about how many remarkable things we have done as a group together. And I wonder how many of those things we've done together is really because we've all been paddling in the same direction, versus the fact that we're an extraordinarily talented group of hundreds and now thousands of individuals who just happen to be going in our own directions, and we're learning from the journeys of each other. Now, George and Christian, we talk about our data network as one example, and we talk about the fact that we've brought together, assembled the world's largest data network. And the one part about paddling together about our data network is that we need to be singing from the same community standard. We've all adopted the OMOP Common Data Model as an approach to do this, but if we think about exactly how we're paddling, we still have challenges in our community because we're not necessarily all exactly following the exact same OMOP Common Data Model, but there's people who are inspired by the OMOP Common Data Model and doing something kind of similar. That's kind of like when Catherine took a paddle and pushed the water, but didn't actually move the boat forward. We also see examples where we have different versions of the common data model, and we're not necessarily aligned to how that fits together. If we really want to accelerate down the river, it's going to be important for us to think about when we say that we're all working together, that we actually try to get to the point where we're working towards the same target. And I think there's an opportunity that what we showed last year with all of the tremendous work that we had done was what happened, but we also ran into several obstacles that were obstacles of our own doing. We chose to run into some rocks along the way on our rafting trip because we made conscious decisions about how we were going to work as a community. And I think some of those opportunities are things that I think we have an opportunity to work on differently in the coming years. Now, we use this picture a lot also. I know we talk about it in the Eden community as we onboard people, that everybody's got data in different data structures, that as long as you can convert your data to the same OMOP common data model, then it becomes really easy to develop open source analysis tools that can be sent to the databases, and really easy to send results back that can become open evidence. And sometimes when people see this picture, they think, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then some people say, it's too good to be true. And I think the experience we've had from the last several years has demonstrated that it is possible to follow this ideal. But what's not easy is making sure that everybody is paddling in the same direction to achieve that all of the consistency that we could achieve in the community actually realizes its potential. In particular, if we think about developing standardized tools, we've ended up in a situation as a community where our tools and our data model haven't been paddling in the same direction. We have amazing advances in statistical methodologies that aren't as easily accessible to the community as they otherwise could be, for reasons of our own doing, of thinking about how we work as a community. And I think there's tremendous opportunities for us to actually say, if we can be clear about where we're paddling to and align to how we're going to paddle as a group, that this picture that we've been able to demonstrate with examples occasionally can actually become our standard way of working as a community. Now, last year, when we had our kind of state of the community kickoff, thinking about 2020, we laid out a specific set of strategic priorities. And I'm incredibly proud of what we as a community did to advance many of these efforts. We did run our concept prevalence study and got not all of the target that we wanted, but many databases to participate and contribute results. And you got to see Anna present that at the symposium. We did collaborate together on some of the shared goals, including our phenotype library, our CDM documentation, and some of our open source development. But even there were issues within our community about how we, not the issue of what we produced, but in the manner in which, as a community, we collaborated to produce it. We made great progress on the Eden Academy and creating community education, but we also recognized that there's a lot more work that needs to be done there, and more coordination that's needed to consolidate the information that's coming from the emerging data standards, the methodologic research that's being done in the community, as well as the educational pieces. Probably the thing I'm most proud about is actually the thing that we didn't anticipate at all, which was how we came together to cultivate network studies that did showcase OHDSI best practices. And that was because we had this specific call to action associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm going to be deliberately provocative during this talk to challenge us to be better, but I want us to all be extraordinarily proud of what we did and simply be reflective of how we did it and how we could potentially be more effective working together as a community. The OHDSI COVID Study-a-thon that was held last March, I think, was a shining example of what's possible when everybody kind of drops what they're doing and focuses on paddling together towards some common objectives. And I think that the output that has come out of our work in COVID that started with this study-a-thon is a testament to what's possible when we decide to choose some common objectives and paddle together to achieve them. And we're still on this journey together that started back then. But I think that already the work that we can be proud of and the work that's being recognized by others outside of our community about OHDSI was how remarkable it was that so many different people from so many different perspectives with such rich and diverse data, so many different perspectives on how to perform analysis could actually work together to achieve very explicit goals. And yet from this work, we've also recognized the challenges that come with community collaboration. And we've identified opportunities to think about, if we had even greater focus and accountability to exactly what it is we're going to achieve, then we might be able to accomplish even more than what we did last year, which was already remarkable and impressive. Last year at the OHDSI Symposium, we saw lots of different stakeholders come together. Well, one nice example that I saw of collaboration was that we set the challenge of everybody filling out a bingo card and seeing all of the people who had joined us for the symposium. And courtesy of Sarah, this is Sarah's bingo card that she had completely filled out, every single card there. But what you saw was a remarkable diversity of backgrounds and perspectives coming together, all showcasing their work and also trying to identify opportunities for collaboration that came out of that. And the question that really has plagued us at the end of each symposium is that whenever we have an event, whether it be in the US or Europe or Asia Pacific, there generally is this groundswell of excitement of, yeah, this is what collaboration is all about. And then we finish the symposium and we go back to our day jobs and we fall into some of the same patterns that we were following before. And the question that we've been asking ourselves as a steering committee is there anything we can be doing as community stewards to help the community work together and collaborate more effectively, even amongst very diverse perspectives and backgrounds that we bring to the table? Now, one very tangible measure that we can look at is publications. And so at the symposium, I shared with you all my wall that I kept in my basement of all of our publications. And the thing that I was looking for wasn't just that we published papers, but the manner in which those papers were generated, the number of collaborators, the number of data sets that was represented in the evidence that we were disseminating. And I think what we accomplished was pretty remarkable and pretty staggering when you all see it all in one place. At the same time, it really raises the question of much of this work happened by pockets of individuals, small groups of individuals working together for their own purposes, for their own motivations. What could we accomplish now that our community has grown so far if we were all to actually decide on the same path that we wanted to paddle down together? Now, in December of last year, our friend Harlan Krumholtz gave the Distinguished Scientist lecture at the American Heart Association. And I think I posted this on our forums a while back, but I found this to be an extraordinarily compelling lecture. And so for those of you who didn't get a chance to read it, it was published in Circulation Outcomes back in December, and it's titled Inflection Point: Ideas for Accelerating Breakthroughs and Improving Cardiovascular Health. Now, what I was motivated by here has nothing to do with cardiovascular health, but it's the call to action that Harlan provided in this lecture that I'd like to at least share two of the salient points with all of you. Harlan specifically in this lecture talked about the amazing things that have happened in 2020 that has really galvanized how science is being done. But he asked the question, what if we thought about all of science in the same level of urgency that we took with COVID-19? And I'll just specifically read this quote. Should we be thinking about our research into non-communicable diseases like heart attack and stroke in a new way, with stronger resolve, more determination, greater accountability, and with bigger aspirations for what is possible because of our experience with the pandemic? These conditions are mostly preventable, cause substantial morbidity, disability, and death, cost society hundreds of billions of dollars annually, and they impose losses on families and friends. Imagine if another global threat appeared on the horizon. Suppose we suddenly recognized that a condition affected 100 million Americans and was a primary contributing cause of death for 500,000 patients a year in this country. with age-adjusted death rate of 300 per 100,000 and estimated annual costs exceeding 130 billion a year. How much urgency would we feel to address this threat? Well, that condition's hypertension. And while Harlan's talking about hypertension there, he's not motivating saying, let's do more research in hypertension. He's saying, let's rethink the critical ways we can do science and bring the things we've learned in the urgency of focus that we brought to COVID to other areas of pressing health considerations. The other quote that I'd like to share from Harlan's speech that I thought was motivating for me is he challenged us. He said that we need to set audacious goals for the future as to how we will subjugate these threats. We have a lot of knowledge we need to make. We have a lot of knowledge that we need to make considerable progress. What should be evident to us, however, is that our progress has been too slow and that the results are disappointing. What should also be obvious is that change is possible. For younger faculty and students, the baton is yours. It is time to reject assumptions about what's possible and how things should be done. Our community can be the spark. Help us change the approach. Promote open science. Expand preprints. Innovate and improve research designs and methods. Propel and strengthen implementation science. Attack disparities as if they were a global pandemic. Ride the digital transformation. And engage in health policy. Now, Harlan was given a lecture at ADA to a bunch of cardiologists. I would assert that he wrote this just for us, that this statement about what's possible and the ways in which change is possible is exactly what we are trying to do as a community in the areas that we could focus on. So I encourage you all to take a look if you're looking for some motivation. I think Harlan's work here was extraordinary, and it certainly was motivating for me. What's also motivating for me is when I go into my OHDSI MS Teams account every morning, I can see how many people have joined us on this journey. When I took this screenshot this morning, you can see that we have 2,056 individuals who have joined the journey. They're members of our community. They have joined the MS Teams environment, and they are able and potentially interested in collaborating together, just like all of you were on this call. So what can we do if we've got 2,056 people paddling in the same direction? The thing that I would like for us to be thinking about as a group is not that me or George or any individual is going to tell you all what you need to do, but what we need to do as a group is decide where do we want to go and how are we going to get there together. And so we've been thinking a lot about frameworks to just help the community with this goal. And one thing we're going to try to experiment with this year is the introduction of the use of objectives and key results, or OKRs. This is a framework that's been adopted by a lot of organizations like Google and Intel and the Gates Foundation. And effectively, it's just a way to say that we want to be clear about what we want to achieve. We want to clearly communicate where we're going. And we want to make sure that everybody has full transparency about our goals so that we can try to paddle in the same direction. So an objective is an ambitious goal that we want to achieve. And a key result is a specific measurable that we can use to benchmark and monitor how we get to the objective. So if we could say, what is that thing we want to do to invoke change in the entire healthcare system, then we can start to try to define very specific accomplishments that we want to achieve together that it's going to help us get there. Now, there's a art to defining and crafting good objectives and key results, and several of us have been trying to go through a preliminary brainstorm to think about exactly what these could be. But what I'd just like for you to think about now is if you are thinking about where you as an individual want to go and where we want to go as a group, let's think about objectives as the what's. Let's come up with some very clear, aggressive, but realistic goals that are clearly going to represent something. And if we accomplish it, that achievement's going to advance forward our mission. And for each of those objectives, let's think about key results as the hows. Some sort of measurable milestone that represents a clearly verifiable outcome that once we hit that, we can say we've made progress towards our objective. If we could define some set of objectives that I think as a group Newcomers who come on could understand what they might be signing up for. And those of us who want to just provide a lending hand can have greater clarity about where their contributions could make the biggest impact. So I posited 3 different potential objectives and key results to the steering group, and I'd like to share them with you here. Not because I'm asserting that these are our objectives, but because I want you to think about what objectives could be and think about whether or not you would like to paddle along in any of these directions. So OHDSI in 2021, we could choose as a community that we want to generate and disseminate real-world evidence about 3 substantial public health issues. We could pick a chronic disease like type 2 diabetes. We can continue our important work in COVID-19. We could tackle the questions of health inequalities that Harlan challenged everybody to do. And if that was going to be our objective, we could think about key results such as that we must produce 3 fully reproducible study packages that will be executed across at least 20 sites in the OHDSI community. That we would generate as a group 10 publications accepted in journals with large impact factors. That we would see the evidence we generate have 10 uses by external stakeholders that demonstrate influence on policy or clinical decision making. That's a possible direction that we could choose to paddle down. Another objective that we could have as a community is that we could enable a community to generate real-world evidence using OHDSI tools and scientific best practices. And if that was the objective that we were sought for, then we could specify key results, such as ensuring that we have 100 organizations fully operational on the same common technical infrastructure. Make sure we're all paddling in the same direction as it relates to the OMOP Common Data Model and Atlas and Hades, so that we're all equally capable of performing analyses. We could set a goal of having 1,000 researchers complete the real-world evidence curriculum available in the Eden Academy. We could set a goal of seeing 100 papers generated that are using OHDSI best practices and tools. So that could be a direction that we could paddle as well. We could also think to try to set some objective that is something that we want to build together. We could choose as a community to build an international medical product safety surveillance system that provides all stakeholders all around the world access to evidence about the incidence and risk of outcomes associated with drug exposure. And if we set a goal that we wanted to build such a ambitious system, well, we could think about key results in terms of the evidence that we would need to generate across 500 drugs and 500 outcomes across 20 databases. We could think about the desire to build a system that had multi-stakeholder active participation and measure that by seeing 100 organizations with at least 1 active user. We could look to see that 10 regulatory actions were actually taken as a result of this system. This could be a direction that we could paddle down. It is not a matter that we have to choose only one direction to paddle, but if we are 2,056 individuals in the community, each paddling in 2,056 different directions, then we're probably not going to be able to get to the same place than if a large collection of us choose to reach a common goal and then we all paddle in that same direction. And so the challenge that as a community that I'd like for us to think about is all of the ways that as a group and as individuals, we can decide on a direction and try to march forward on that. Now, our steering group has been thinking about different objectives that we could strive towards. And what we realized is that there's already tremendous work that's happening implicitly within our community towards a lot of these goals. It's just that we've never been explicit in communicating it. If we have a high-level goal of generating and disseminating reliable evidence that's useful for decision-making, there's lots of different aspects of that that we could be focused on. We can think about increasing the scale and efficiency of generating evidence, increasing the reproducibility of the evidence generation process, improving our network of data that's available, identifying the right questions to answer, improving our mechanisms for dissemination. But even this second tier of objectives can be further broken out, because if we want to increase the scale and efficiency of generating evidence, there's different strategies that we could take to get there. We could develop and apply large-scale solutions. We could actually focus on increasing the number of people capable of generating evidence. We could focus on educating people on tools and best practices, or we could focus on developing tools. If our goal is to improve our network of data, then we can build tools, but we can also figure out how to improve the adherence to our to adoption of consistent standards, and just increasing the adoption more broadly. There are other types of activities that are happening within our community already. We've just never actually taken the time to explicitly lay out a roadmap of how all of those pieces fit together. And I think that as a community, one of the things that we can do, that we can just do, is just to be more clear about what we are each working on, what our objectives are, and how the pieces fit together. And so one of the things I'd like to propose for 2021 is that we start to think about what those objectives are going to be, and how all of the pieces and the individual contributions that everybody's making, how they fit into some broader objective that we as a group specify together. Now, I want to highlight that as we laid all of these things out, we recognize that we've got lots of work groups already in the OHDSI community. We've got groups that are really thinking about data problems. We've got groups thinking about methods research problems. We've got groups thinking about open source development. We've got groups that are specializing in specific clinical areas. We had multiple groups come out of our COVID work. And we've got special interest groups focused on specific populations of interest, including our steering group that helped motivate many of the thoughts that I'm sharing with you today. The issue isn't that we don't have enough people. The issue isn't that we don't have enough talent or capabilities. The issue, I think, is as simple as communication and coordination. And that's something that takes a little bit of an effort for us to commit to do. But if we do it, I think we're going to see substantial return on investment from that collaborative effort. So I want you to go back to that website that I sent you before. And you should now see the question: what should OHDSI's 2021 objectives be? And I'd like for you to take a couple of minutes here. You could vote for the ones that I've shared with you as directions that we could paddle. You could also type in your own ideas. There's no right answers here. And this is, don't worry, this is not how we're going to, in a few minutes, decide the future of OHDSI. But I'd like you to just take the next couple of minutes to think and reflect about objective opportunities that you see that could be what you want to do as an individual, could be what you want to do with some small subgroup within the community, or it could be the thing that you think you'd be inspired to continue staying on this journey together, that we feel like we can actually move the needle. I'm seeing many of you guys are voting for three of the directions that we had initially brainstormed. We're seeing a lot of interest in focusing on generating and disseminating real-world evidence about substantial public health issues. Seeing 11 of you here have voted on enabling a community to generate real-world evidence using OHDSI tools and scientific best practices. A smaller number, but still some, are interested in a vision towards building an international medical product safety surveillance system. If someone who wants to see OHDSI science impacting policy, absolutely a goal. I want you to, I'm going to leave this poll open even beyond the meeting, and I'm going to ask people to post additional responses in here for the rest of today and more broadly. I'd love to get some greater input from all of you, but this isn't the only objective that this isn't the way in which we should set objectives, but the idea of thinking together about what our objectives should be is something that I would like to see us target. So what I'd like to propose is, as a community, we deliberately choose some areas of focus together, that we decide where we're going to paddle this year, and we hold each other accountable to try to go in that direction. To do that, I suggest that we not only try to reach general awareness and agreement towards OHDSI's overall objectives and key results, but that each of our work groups specifically define 1 to 3 objectives and key results that those work groups are going to strive to accomplish themselves. Those may or may not align to the overall OHDSI OKRs, but at least if we have transparency and visibility about what each groups are doing, everybody in the community can benefit from knowing who's trying to accomplish what. If we come, or when we come up with these key objectives and key results, we'll keep a dashboard front and center to keep us paddling in the same direction. So while you heard Craig at the start say that we're going to be continuing to look at where have we been, where are we now, and where are we going, we'd like for these objectives and key results to help provide us a little bit of a map on that journey. We'll specifically use these key results to evaluate the progress we're making as a community every quarter, both overall and for our work groups, to see if we're on track and decide if we need as a community to pivot in a different direction. The most important thing, though, that I want to share with you is I don't want to be the person, and neither does, I think there isn't any group within OHDSI that should be defining this for everybody else. This needs to be something that everybody has shared ownership and buy-in towards. And that's why you'll be seeing an announcement from Craig in the next couple of days that we'd like to try to schedule an OHDSI OKR-a-thon, which will be a one-day event where we want to hear from as many of you as possible. We'll provide both synchronous and asynchronous ways to hear your input about what you want to see OHDSI accomplish, whether that be what you are going to contribute individually or what you would just love to see OHDSI achieve through the collective contributions of everybody else. So we will be scheduling that event as something that I'd really love to hear, whether your ambitions are small or large. If we can put that all together, I think we can actually be going a long way down the river together. So I'm going to leave it with that. If anybody's willing to come paddle with me, I promise to hold on to the 4-year-old if you'll all do the hard work and paddle with me. I will stop there. I know we've got a few minutes to open it up. I'd be interested to hearing any thoughts and impressions on this direction that we'd like to take the community moving forward.
Are you still in that boat, Patrick? I can't see you.
Yeah, I was not holding my paddling up or smiling when it was just me and Catherine, but if I get in a boat with you, Christian, then maybe we can smile.
Definitely.
We do have a couple minutes if there's anybody who wants to make a comment or ask a question. Just want to let you know we will be posting Patrick's part of this video to OHDSI.org. Try to keep these weekly meetings documented, recorded presentations on OHDSI.org. So look for that in the next couple of days. But anybody have any comments or questions?
Danny here. So I think this is a great idea, Patrick. I have experienced the setting up of objectives, and it's not something that's very easy to do. So I think that dedicating a whole day of quality time to it, I think is worth doing. And there are plenty of tools that people have used in the past to kind of facilitate brainstorming and get into the right objectives. So maybe we need to look for those, and I would be happy to help if that's helpful.
That'd be great. Thank you, Danny.
So this is George. Hi. So this is an opportunity, like we often think about what, how can we get this thing going faster or better in a direction we think it should go. And this is the opportunity to do that. So we need to take this opportunity and give this a shot. Look, it won't go badly. It's either going to go as well as before or better. So we have no downside here. We have to try and do this. And I think we'll learn a lot from it. We might shift course and do it slightly differently based on what we learn, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to learn important information through this exercise.
Okay, so we are at 12 o'clock. As Patrick mentioned, look for more information about a potential date to do this OKR-a-thon. And we'll certainly look for as much community engagement as possible. Thank you all for taking the time to join us an hour earlier. As I mentioned to Christian at the beginning, we are going to try to make this possible to be on everybody's calendar. There's a little bit of technical work that needs to be done. So check for that by the end of the week. Either it's going to be another one-off, or hopefully by the end of this week, we'll have a weekly schedule set, and that can be part of your calendar. Otherwise, thanks everybody for joining, and have a great afternoon or evening.
Thanks,
Take care.
everybody.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.
Bye-bye. Thank you.